My son cried out in horror the moment he stepped inside. "Mom, what did you do?" His voice echoed through the empty house, a voice that used to make me smile, now trembling with disbelief. I didn't answer. I just sat there in my chair, in the middle of that hollow room where every sound seemed too loud, too honest. Lawrence stood in the doorway, his face pale, his wife right behind him, both staring at the stripped walls, the bare floor, the nothingness. The furniture was gone. The TV was gone. The pictures, the rug, the clock that used to tick too loud, all gone. "Where's everything, Mom?" he shouted again, his voice cracking with anger this time. His wife's gasp filled the silence that followed, sharp, offended. I looked at them calmly. My hands were folded in my lap, my heart steady. "I sold a few things," I said softly. "I needed the money." Lawrence blinked, confused. "You sold everything?" I nodded. "Yes. After all, since you'll be managing my finances, I thought it was wise to keep a little cash on hand." His face turned red, not from worry, but from rage. That was the moment I finally saw my son for what he had become. Not the boy I raised with blistered hands and sleepless nights. Not the man I thought I'd built with love and sacrifice. But a stranger. "You're crazy," he spat. "Completely crazy. How could you do this without asking me? What are we supposed to do when we come over now? How are we going to be comfortable here?" That word we cut deeper than any insult. He wasn't worried about me. He was worried about himself. His wife stepped forward, her perfume sharp and cold. "Patricia, you're being selfish," she said, her voice soft but poisonous. "We come here every week to keep you company, to make sure you're okay. And this is how you repay us." I almost laughed. Selfish. The woman who had worked 2 jobs, who'd gone hungry to buy her son sneakers, he didn't need selfish. Lawrence didn't defend me. He just looked at me like I was a problem to fix. "Maybe you're not capable of managing things anymore, Mom," he said coldly. "Maybe I need to step in before you do something stupid." There it was, the tone. The pity disguised as control. I stood up slowly. "Dinner's not ready," I said. "If you're hungry, go somewhere else." The silence that followed was thick and suffocating. His wife let out a bitter laugh. "Unbelievable," she muttered. Lawrence's jaw tightened. "You should be careful, Mom. A woman your age, alone, without family who really cares, can end up in a bad place." They stormed out, slamming the door behind them. I listened to the echo fade, to the hum of my refrigerator, to the silence that finally belonged to me. I sat back down and stared at the bare walls, the ones that once held memories, now stripped clean. And for the first time in a very long time, I smiled, because I hadn't sold the furniture for money. I'd sold it for truth. I needed to see who my son really was. Now I knew. And that night, in the emptiness of my kitchen, I made a quiet promise. I wouldn't yell. I wouldn't beg. I would wait. And when the time came, Lawrence would finally learn who Patricia Mendez really was. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. Old habits never die, especially the ones built from survival. For 30 years, I'd risen early to pack lunches, iron shirts, and cook meals for a house full of people who never noticed the smell of effort. I used to believe that kind of giving made me strong. Now I know it made me invisible. The house was quieter now. No TV, no ticking clock, no laughter pretending to belong here. Just me, and the hum of the fridge I'd kept out of habit, not hunger. I made myself coffee black, simple, honest. It tasted like independence. As I sat by the window, I thought about all the years I'd built my life around my son's comfort. Lawrence never had to know the weight of an unpaid bill or the sting of going without. I made sure of that. When his father died, he was 17, angry at the world, angry at me. But I worked double shifts, picked up side jobs, sold my wedding ring to keep him in school. He graduated with new shoes, not knowing they'd been bought with the money meant for groceries. I was proud of that sacrifice once. Now it just felt like proof of how quietly women learn to disappear. The day after the argument, Lawrence didn't call, not even a text, but his wife did. A short message, all smiles and poison. "We'll help you sort things out soon. Don't make any more decisions without us." I stared at that heart emoji longer than I cared to admit. That tiny red shape said more than her words ever could. It meant we own you. It meant stay small. So I made another decision that day when they wouldn't see coming. I pulled out a box from the top shelf of my closet. Inside were old files, yellowed with time, property deeds, insurance papers, and one sealed envelope my husband had left behind. I'd never opened it. He told me, only when you feel truly alone. My fingers trembled as I broke the seal. Inside was a letter, written in his slanted handwriting. Patty, if you ever feel like the world has taken more than it gave, remember you built this life with your own hands. Don't let anyone take credit for that. At the bottom was a key. No label, no hint, just cold silver truth. I turned it over in my palm, trying to remember what it might open. A memory flickered. An old storage unit we rented years ago, before we bought this house. Unit 312. I hadn't thought about that place in decades. But that night, as the streetlights flickered outside, I made up my mind. If my son wanted control of what I had left, he was about to learn I had more than he ever knew. The storage facility looked smaller than I remembered. Rows of metal doors stretched into the distance, their paint flaking like old memories. The air smelled of dust and rain-soaked concrete, the scent of things forgotten but not gone. I told the clerk my name. He looked it up, blinked, and said, "You've had this unit for 34 years, Mrs. Mendez. Guess I'm sentimental," I said with a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. The lock was stiff. When the key finally turned, it did so with a sigh, like something exhaling after holding its breath for too long. I pulled the door up slowly. Light spilled into the darkness, landing on boxes stacked neatly against the walls. My husband's handwriting was on every one. I brushed my hand over the nearest lid. Documents 1991. Tools. Blueprints. Blueprints? I dragged the box forward and opened it. Inside were rolled sheets of paper, yellowed and fragile, bound with string. Each one stamped with an old company name, Mendez Design and Build. For a moment, I just stared. That company hadn't existed in decades. It was the business my husband and I started when we were newly married, a small construction firm that barely survived 3 years before folding under bills and bad luck. At least, that's what I'd always believed. But as I unrolled the papers, something caught my eye. Each blueprint bore 2 signatures, his and mine. Co-owner. It said beside my name. My pulse quickened. I opened another box. More files, permits, bank slips, letters from clients addressed to Mrs. Patricia Mendez, partner. I sank to my knees. He'd never told me. Not once in all those years did he say that the business had been ours, not just his. Maybe he thought he was protecting me, or maybe he assumed I already knew. I pressed my hand to my chest, feeling my heart beat against the truth. All those years I thought I'd only been supporting him. I'd been building with him. At the very bottom of the box lay another envelope. My name again, in his familiar scrawl. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a photograph. The photo was of us standing in front of a half-built house, both of us covered in dust and sunburn. On the back, he'd written, "For the woman who built more than she ever took credit for." The paper beneath it was a deed to a piece of land, purchased long ago under both our names. Untouched, unclaimed. I sat there on the cold floor, surrounded by boxes that smelled of wood and time. All this, forgotten in a storage unit, while my son lectured me about being irresponsible. I laughed softly, not out of humor, but relief. For the first time in years, I remembered who I really was. When I locked the door again, the key felt lighter in my hand. I slipped it onto my chain beside my wedding ring. Some inheritances come in paper, some come in pain. But the rarest kind, the kind that truly saves you, comes when you remember your own worth. And as I drove home that night, one thought refused to leave me. My husband may have left this world early, but he left me a message that was loud and clear. You were never just a helper. You were the foundation. I didn't tell anyone about what I found in the storage unit. Not my friends. Not the neighbors. Certainly not my son. Some truths lose their power when spoken too soon. For a week, I carried that secret like a small flame cupped in my hands, protecting it from the wind, waiting for the right moment to let it burn. Every morning, I made coffee and sat at the same bare kitchen table, Where others saw emptiness, I saw space. Space to rebuild. Space to breathe. The deed from the storage box sat in front of me. 5 acres of untouched land, just outside town. Paid off. Forgotten by everyone except the men who believed I'd one day need it. I spent the next few days at the county office. The clerks were polite, but curious. Most women my age come in asking about pensions or taxes, not land deeds and ownership transfers. I left each time with a folder full of answers and a plan forming quietly in my mind. On the third visit, one of the clerks, a kind young woman named Teresa, looked up from her computer. "Mrs. Mendez, you could sell this property for quite a lot," she said. I smiled. "I'm not selling. I'm building." Her eyebrows rose. "Building what?" I just smiled again. "Something that lasts." That night, I wrote my husband's name in my old notebook and drew a small sketch beneath it, the outline of a modest house, surrounded by trees. Not big, not fancy, just mine. Later, the phone rang. Lawrence. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. "Mom," he said, voice rehearsed to calm. "I've been thinking, maybe it's time we help you move into assisted living, somewhere safe, with people who can check on you." The old me would have cried. The old me would have defended herself, begged him to believe she was still capable. But that woman was gone. "That's thoughtful," I said softly. "But I already have plans." There was a pause. "What kind of plans?" "You'll see." He sighed. The kind of sigh that always came before he raised his voice. "Mom, you can't make big decisions like this on your own." I looked around my empty house, my walls, my silence, my freedom. "Oh, Lawrence," I said gently, "you still don't understand. I've been making big decisions on my own since before you could walk." He hung up without saying goodbye. I sat there smiling, my hands wrapped around a cup of cooling tea. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small or old. I felt ready. Because when a woman remembers who she used to be, there's nothing more dangerous or more beautiful. The road to the property was long and crooked, just like the path that had led me here. It wound through old oak trees and open fields. The kind of land where silence doesn't feel empty, it feels alive. When I reached the gate, the sign was so faded it barely whispered, "Lot 23 Mendez property." I stood there for a moment, staring at the weeds curling around the posts. It had been decades since anyone touched this place, but the earth doesn't forget who loved it. The soil was soft under my shoes. The wind carried the scent of rain and something sweet, wildflowers, maybe, or memory. I walked a few paces in, my hands brushing against tall grass, and for a second, I could almost hear my husband's voice. "One day, Patty, we'll build something here that's ours, no banks, no bosses, no begging." That day had finally come. He just wasn't here to see it. I sat on a flat rock near the center of the land and pulled out my notebook. The page was blank except for the words I'd written last night. Start again. It felt impossible building at my age alone. But the impossible was something I'd spent a lifetime doing quietly. Raising a son without help. Working 2 jobs without rest. Loving people who never learned to say thank you. As I wrote, a truck engine rumbled behind me. I turned to see a man stepping out, tall, broad-shouldered. The kind of face time hadn't been too kind to but hadn't defeated either. "Mrs. Mendez?" he asked, taking off his hat. "Yes. I'm Raphael. Teresa from the county office said you might need someone who knows their way around old land." "She's my niece." He offered a hand, rough and warm from work. "I helped your husband survey this lot years ago," he said. "Didn't think I'd see it again." I smiled. "Neither did I." He looked around, then nodded toward the horizon. "Ground's good here. Stable. You could build something strong." "That's the plan," I said. He studied me for a moment. "You planning to live here alone?" I met his eyes. "I've been living alone for years. Just didn't realize it until recently." He chuckled softly, not out of pity, but respect. "Well," he said, "every foundation needs someone who believes in it. I'll bring my tools tomorrow." When he left, the air was still humming with his words. Every foundation needs someone who believes in it. As I stood there, wind tangling through my hair, I realized something. I wasn't just building a house. I was building a home for the woman I'd finally become. And somewhere deep inside, The part of me that used to whisper "you can't" finally fell silent. The mornings came earlier out there. The sun didn't ask permission, it simply rose, spilling gold across the field, touching every blade of grass like an old friend saying, "You made it back." Raphael kept his word. He arrived each day at sunrise, his truck full of tools, his hand steady, his eyes patient. He didn't talk much while he worked, just the sound of hammer and wind and time starting over. I brought coffee in a thermos, 2 cups. We'd sit on overturned buckets during breaks, watching the shape of a home rise from the dirt, board by board, nail by nail. "You ever think it's too late to start again?" I asked one morning. Raphael smiled without looking up. "It's only too late when you stop believing you can." That line stayed with me. It hummed in my chest like a prayer I didn't know I needed. By the end of the second week, the frame was standing simple, sturdy, strong. Raphael ran his hand over one of the beams. "Your husband picked good land," he said. I nodded. He always did. That evening, after he left, I walked through the empty frame alone. The air smelled of sawdust and soil. Each step echoed softly against the wood, like the house was already learning my heartbeat. Then my phone rang. "Lawrence." I hesitated, staring at the screen. A month ago, I would have answered on the first ring. Now, I waited until the fourth. "Mom." His tone was half curious, half commanding. "Hello, Lawrence. I heard from the bank you've been moving money." "What are you doing?" "Building," I said simply. He laughed sharp, incredulous. "At your age? With what money?" I let him laugh. It was easier than explaining how much wealth lives in peace of mind. "Don't worry," I said. "I'm not touching the accounts you control. That's not the point." He snapped. "You're making reckless decisions." "Reckless?" I smiled. "No, son. Free. There's a difference." He sighed heavily. "You're losing it, Mom. I'm coming over this weekend. We need to talk." "I won't be home," I said. "I'll be working." He paused, confused. "Working on what?" I looked out across the field, the skeleton of my house glowing under the fading light. "On my life," I said softly, and hung up. That night, I stood under the stars, feeling something I hadn't felt in decades: ownership of my choices, of my space, of my peace. For years, I'd handed over pieces of myself for the sake of love that demanded obedience. Now, I was finally giving something to the only person who had truly earned it. As the wind swept through the tall grass, the frame of the house creaked gently, alive, breathing, beginning, and I whispered into the night, "You can't lose what was never theirs to own." Saturday came with heavy clouds. By noon, I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. Raphael looked up from the beam he was measuring. "Expecting company?" I shook my head. "No, but the past always knows where to find you." Lawrence's car rolled to a stop beside the gate. He stepped out wearing his city shoes, his wife close behind, heels sinking into the mud. They both stared at the half-built house like it was a crime scene. "Mom," he said, voice clipped. "What is this?" I wiped the sawdust from my hands. "My new beginning." He glanced at Raphael, his tone sharpening. "And who's he?" "Someone who builds instead of judges," I answered. Carly gave a small, offended laugh. "You can't be serious. This is ridiculous. You can't live out here alone." I looked at the horizon, wide, patient, free. "Watch me." Lawrence's face reddened. "Where did you even get the money for this? Did you sell something else?" I smiled. "Just an old idea that I wasn't enough." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration turning into panic. "Mom, listen to yourself. You're throwing everything away. You need help." I stepped closer, voice low but steady. "I do have help. From people who don't need to own me to prove they care." The wind caught his shirt. The clouds above broke open with a thin line of sunlight that fell across the new frame, golden against the gray. He followed my gaze, silent for a long moment. "Why are you doing this?" he asked finally. "Because I spent my life building homes for other people," I said. "Now I'm building one for the woman they forgot I was." He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Carly tugged at his sleeve. "We should go. She's lost it." But he didn't move. Something in his eyes had shifted, not agreement. Not yet. But confusion softening into wonder. Raphael cleared his throat gently. "We'll need to finish the roof before the next rain." I nodded. Let's get back to work. As I turned away, I heard Carly mutter, let her waste her money. And then Lawrence's voice, quiet but different this time. It's her money. They left without another word. The car disappeared down the winding road, dust rising behind it like the last echo of control blowing away. Raphael looked at me and smiled. You handled that better than most judges handle trials. I laughed softly. This wasn't a trial. It was a verdict I'd already reached. When the sun finally broke through the clouds, it painted the new walls in gold. For the first time in years, I felt the warmth without guilt, because sometimes victory doesn't shout. Sometimes it just keeps building. The rain came that night, heavy, steady, honest. It drummed on the half-built roof like fingers keeping time with the truth.by morning. The ground was soaked, but the foundation held. It always does when it's been poured with purpose. Raphael showed up early, boots caked with mud, grin wide. Looks like she passed her first test, he said, patting one of the beams. She's stronger than she looks, I replied. He laughed. I was talking about the house. But you too. We got back to work. By afternoon, the clouds broke, sunlight spilling across the wet grass like forgiveness. That's when I saw Lawrence's car again, slower this time. Hesitant, as if even he wasn't sure why he'd come. He parked but didn't get out right away. I watched from the porch frame as he sat behind the wheel, staring at the house that was becoming real. Not just stubborn talk. When he finally stepped out, he didn't speak. He just walked, his shoes sinking in the mud. He stopped beside me, eyes tracing the wood, the nails, the sweat-stained gloves resting on the sawhorse. You really built all this? He asked quietly. With help, I said. But yes. He exhaled, his voice small. I thought you were losing it. I was, I said. Losing patience, losing peace, losing myself. I decided to stop. He looked at the roof, the unfinished walls, the pieces of my new life standing proud against the open sky. Dad used to talk about this land, he said softly. Said one day it would mean something. It already did, I replied. He just didn't live long enough to see what. He nodded, eyes glistening, the first crack in years of arrogance and assumption. I saw the boy he used to be. The one who brought me wildflowers and believed I could fix anything. Mom, he said, voice trembling, I was just trying to take care of you. I know, I said, but you forgot I've been taking care of both of us my whole life. He looked down, shame and tenderness twisting together. I thought you needed me. I did, I said. Just not the way you thought. Raphael cleared his throat behind us. We could use another pair of hands if you're staying. Lawrence hesitated, then glanced at me. I shrugged. Every foundation gets stronger when the right people show up. And for the first time in years, my son smiled at me, not out of pity, not out of guilt, but recognition. The kind that says, I see you now. He took the hammer from Raphael, awkward in his polished shoes, and struck the next nail too hard. We all laughed. Even the wind seemed to join in. That evening, as the sun dipped low, the house stood taller, walls rising, shadows fading. Lawrence wiped the sweat from his forehead and looked around. Feels different here, he said. It is, I replied. It's honest. And as the light stretched across the field, I realized that sometimes love doesn't return in words or apologies, it returns in work, in effort, in the simple act of showing up again. By the time the walls stood tall and the roof met the sky, the house had begun to feel alive. You could hear it, the soft groan of new wood, the sigh of wind sneaking through open windows, the heartbeat of something being reborn. I walked through the room slowly, touching the frames with my fingertips. It wasn't big. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. Every board, every nail, every inch built from what they once called a mistake. Raphael stood by the doorway, arms crossed, sawdust clinging to his shirt. Not bad for a woman who wasn't supposed to know what she was doing, he teased. I smiled. I've spent a lifetime pretending I didn't know. He chuckled softly. That's what makes you dangerous, outside. Lawrence was painting one of the outer walls, his strokes careful, uneven, earnest. He hadn't said much the past few days, just worked. But sometimes silence carries more apology than words ever could. I brought him water. He wiped his brow and said quietly, I didn't know Dad left this place to you. He didn't, I said. He left it to us. But only one of us remembered to come back. He stared at the paintbrush, the air heavy between us. I thought I was protecting you. I know, I said. That's what control often looks like when it wears good intentions. He looked up, eyes wet, voice cracking. I don't deserve your forgiveness. I handed him the water. Then earn it. Keep painting. We both smiled, small, but real. When the sun dipped low, the house glowed like a secret finally told. Raphael packed his tools, tipping his hat. She's ready, he said. Strong foundation. She'll outlive us all. That's the point, I said. When he left, I stood at the front steps with Lawrence. We watched the sky bleed gold into purple. The kind of color that only appears when a storm's been forgiven, Mom. He said after a long silence, what are you going to do now? I looked at the house, the land, the sky, all of it mine, but not mine to keep forever. I'm going to fill it, I said softly. Not with things, with purpose. He frowned slightly. Purpose? Women like me spend our lives building homes for others, feeding, mending, holding until there's nothing left for ourselves. But this time, I'll use these walls differently. He watched me quietly. What are you going to do? I smiled. You'll see. Later that night, after he'd gone home, I walked through the half-finished living room again, running my hand along the smooth wood. And I realized I wasn't rebuilding a house. I was building a place for other women like me, the ones forgotten after giving everything. The ones called crazy when they finally said no. The ones who just needed proof that starting over wasn't the same as giving up. I whispered to the empty room. This house won't just hold me. It'll hold the ones who think they can begin again. And somehow, I knew my husband would have smiled. 2 weeks later, the house was finished. The paint dried soft against the morning sun. The windows gleamed with new glass. And the wind moved through the rooms like a blessing. I stood on the porch with a cup of coffee, staring at the sign Raphael helped me hang above the door. It wasn't fancy, just hand-carved wood. The letters uneven but proud. Casa Nueva. New home. The words looked simple, but they carried everything: the years of silence, the bruises of love, the lessons I'd buried beneath motherhood. Raphael joined me, wiping his hands on a rag. She's beautiful, he said, looking at the house. She's ready, I replied. A few cars pulled up the dirt road soon after, women from town. Most of them I'd met at the grocery store or the church. Widows, single mothers. One woman who'd been sleeping in her car for weeks. They stepped out hesitantly, eyes scanning the land, unsure if they belonged here. I smiled and opened the door. You do now. They walked in slowly, touching the walls, whispering things like, it feels peaceful here. I watched them and felt something shift inside me, not pride, not victory, peace, the kind that comes only when pain has finally done its job and moved on. Raphael nodded toward them. You're really doing this? I already did, I said. I built it for them, for anyone who's been told she's too late to start over. Just then, Lawrence's car appeared at the top of the hill. He stepped out with that same uncertain look, like a man seeing his mother for the first time, not as someone to protect, but as someone to learn from. He walked up the porch steps. Mom, this is what you meant, isn't it? I nodded. Home isn't a place people give you. It's the one you build after they take everything else. He looked at the women inside, their voices soft but full of something rare, hope. His eyes watered. Dad would have been proud of you. I smiled gently. He always was. I just never stopped long enough to notice. Lawrence reached out, and for the first time in years, we hugged, not out of guilt, not out of obligation, but because we finally understood each other. Raphael cleared his throat from the yard. We still need to build that fence, he said. I laughed softly. Let's leave it open for now. Some people still need to find their way in. That evening, as the sun melted behind the hills, the house glowed warm, alive, and full of voices. Not one of them asked for permission to be there. They just belonged. And for the first time, I didn't feel like a mother, or a widow, or a woman starting over. I felt whole, because sometimes, rebuilding your life isn't about reclaiming what was lost. It's about creating what should have existed all along. The days that followed felt different, lighter, not because everything was easy but because nothing was heavy anymore. Every morning, the women of Casa Nueva gathered on the porch for coffee. They laughed, shared stories, mended broken dreams one cup at a time. No one compared scars. We just let them exist, visible, real, and finally harmless. Sometimes I'd watch them and think, this is what love should have looked like all along. Not control, not fear, just presence. Lawrence visited often now. He'd help with small repairs, paint touch-ups, or fixing the old swing Raphael built in the yard. He didn't talk about money anymore. He didn't tell me what I should do. He just asked how I'd been sleeping, and I'd tell him the truth for the first time in years. I slept through the night. One afternoon, as we sat on the porch watching the sun dip low, he asked, "Mom, aren't you tired doing all this?" I smiled. I used to get tired from pleasing everyone. This kind of work gives back what it takes. He nodded quietly, then said something that made me catch my breath. I used to think strength meant control, but now I see. It's letting people be who they are even when that means they don't need you. I looked at him, proud and calm. That's love, son. The quiet kind. The only kind that lasts. Later, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat alone in the garden. The night smelled like jasmine and wet soil. The moonlight spilled over the house like silver forgiveness. I thought about all the versions of myself I'd been: the young wife full of plans, the exhausted mother, the woman who forgot she mattered, and the one who finally remembered. It struck me that we don't really change with time. We return to the person we were before the world told us who we should be. In that stillness, I felt my husband's presence again, not in sadness, but in peace. I whispered into the night, "We built it, love. Not the house, the strength." And somewhere, I swear I heard the wind answer back, "You always did." The garden lights flickered softly. The world felt smaller, quieter, kinder, and for the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for anyone to come home. Because I already was. It's early morning again. The kind of morning where the world feels soft, as if even the sun has learned to whisper. I sit on the porch with my coffee, the steam curling into the light. The house is quiet behind me, still half asleep. Inside, a few of the women stir, gentle footsteps, the clink of a cup, a laugh too fragile to hide. I smile. Those sounds used to belong to other people's homes. Now they belong to mine. Lawrence planted a tree near the porch last week, a small oak, stubborn and reaching. He said it was for his father, but I think maybe it was for all of us. When he left yesterday, he hugged me longer than usual. Not out of guilt, that kind of hug fades too fast. This one came from gratitude, from understanding. The kind that doesn't need words to stay. The women will be awake soon. There's breakfast to cook, letters to answer, a new resident coming today, a quiet woman who's been through her own storm. Raphael's already promised to fix the fence by noon. Life, I've learned, doesn't always heal loudly. Sometimes it just rearranges itself around what's left of you, and somehow, that becomes enough. I look out at the horizon, wide, forgiving, endless. Once, I thought the end of my life would be quiet and small. Now, I see it's just beginning again, not in youth, but in peace. I pick up my notebook and write one last line under all the sketches, plans, and half-finished thoughts that carried me here. Every woman who rebuilds herself builds something that outlives her. Then I close the notebook, set it aside, and let the light find me. The wind moves through the trees, and I hear a soft whisper, not from memory, but from the life still waiting ahead. Sometimes, the strongest thing you can build isn't a home or a family, it's yourself. I didn't lose everything, my dear. I just gave up what was never meant to keep me small.